Hey guys, welcome to what I believe is book review number 36. Today I'm going to be reviewing China Roads, A Journey into the Future of a Rising Power by Rob Gifford. There. So what this story is Rob Gifford was an NPR correspondent in China for I think about 7 years or so. And right at the end of his time in China, he decided to take a road trip. You guys see me? Take a road trip across China along Route 312, which is sort of like the Route 66 or Route 66 in the United States. Kind of a historic highway from one end of China to the other. Well, anyway, he starts off, let me get the map out here. Starts off in Shanghai and kind of talks about some of the glitz and glam of the Pudong district, as well as kind of the historical glitz of the Bund, which is kind of, if you don't know about Shanghai, is right now a very hot center of economics and business. I mean, maybe one of the hottest in the world. But for a long time laid kind of dormant, like during the communist era. But dating all the way back to like the early 1900s, maybe like late 1800s, was a huge center of commerce, but also of like colonialism, not in controlling all of China, but just advantageous, or some would say unfair, trade practices from the French, British, and other colonial powers that led to its rise as a predominant city first during that era, and then kind of now it's all being recycled, albeit without the colonial aspect. Some of the highest buildings in the whole world are in Shanghai. And he also talks just about, you know, like the freeways and just the insane pace of development within the city. But then he drives out into the country, and sort of on the exurbs of Shanghai is where he sees all these faceless factories, and kind of talks a little bit about that and their effect on the world economy and everything. Then he moves on to Nanjing, the historical capital, talks a little bit about the history there. One good thing about this book is, well, it could be good or bad depending on the way you look at it. It took a very broad perspective. So you got some stories, and the stories were good, but it didn't spend too much time on any one thing. And what it did is it took kind of almost like short stories of individuals and related them to larger circumstances. So we moved on to Nanjing and talked a little bit about the rape of Nanjing and the historical importance of the capital. The Sun Yat-sen Memorial, which is considered, Sun Yat-sen is considered one of the, while debated whether, you know, he would have been communist or nationalist. He died in the 1920s, I want to say, 20s or 30s. Both sides politically view him as important in creating a Chinese identity, Chinese nationality. So it goes to Nanjing, and then moves on to the Anhui province, which is sort of a lot of people consider it a backwards province, but it's kind of the historical heartland of agriculture and Chinese civilization in a lot of ways. Well, actually, more civilization is more Henan, but Anhui has a lot of history, but it's primarily just viewed as like a real rural area. And actually the Chinese despise this. They have no sentimentality for the rural life like we do in the United States. So a lot of people just view people from this province as really below them. I believe it's in either Anhui or Henan. I think it's in Henan, where yeah, he moves on to the Henan province, which is the old historical capital. We're talking like, you know, 200 BC to 400 AD or something like that. before it eventually gets moved to Nanjing. And yeah, I think it's in Zhenjiang or something, or maybe that's Xi'an. Well, anyway, I'm getting a little confused. But he talks about the history of the Henan province, but he also talks about recent events. One of the most egregious being the total flub by the federal government in a blood donation program. So when when Mao Zedong died, after all the Cultural Revolution and all the backwards of that, the country opened up and became more capitalistic, money-driven, whatever. But they were also looking out for their own citizens, so what they tried to do is, for poor rural farmers, they would do these blood drives where people could donate blood, and then get a small amount of money, not a small amount of money to these farmers, but, you know, maybe a small amount to us, but very, like a month's wage worth for these farmers. So very important to their supplemental income. But what happened is that when they were doing these blood draws, and this was something promoted by the central government, so it wasn't just like some local thing, they used unsafe needles. Actually, it wasn't needles. What it was the containers that they had the blood in. They would use the needle, draw the blood, circle out the plasma, and then pump the blood back in. But they weren't sterilizing the containers or using different containers each time. So what happened is, actually there was a AIDS patient that, or somebody with AIDS that got their blood drawn, and then the Chinese didn't know about this at the time, or weren't testing it, or were just using unsafe techniques. So there were, I don't know if it was like 2,000 or something like that, people in this province got HIV, AIDS, because of this technique. So it's not like they were having unsafe sex, or, you know, using illegal drugs or something like that. It was something promoted by the government in order to supply or supplement the income of these people. Yeah, and he just talks about that and how kind of sickly sad that is. Interviewed maybe like 3 or 4 people. Talked to an activist that's trying to get their case kind of more known, but once again is in leery ground because of the way that China cracks down on political movements, or anything that essentially makes the central government look bad. So after he does this, he moved on to Nanyang and Shaanxi. He goes to Xi'an, which is another historical capital. And actually, I think that's the one that Xi'an in the Shaanxi province is the one that lasted from like 200 BC to like 400 AD. But views some of the tombs there. He also goes to this mountain and meets with a monk in Huishan, which is one of the, I think, 4 or 5 sacred mountains of Taoism, which is like the indigenous religion of China. And what I thought was interesting about him going and meeting this monk is the contrast between the main sites on this mountain. It's like a huge mountain, and how it was just packed. This place was packed with people on the main shrines, the main sites. But he got a little secret trail to go to this tiny little hut, cave dwelling of this monk. And even 5 minutes away from the main trail, it's like he was in the middle of nowhere, even though he was on the mountain with all these other Chinese people. And it was actually really cool, because it was just sort of like a little insider thing that, you know, you go and you see the main sites you know, wouldn't take for granted. It's sort of like not just the circus, you get a little bit of the real deal, the real monk living in some cave and thing. But anyway, then he moves on to Gansu, and this is when kind of China changes geographically from the rice region, the hugely populated Han majority, to the minority districts, to the extremely unpopulated western part of China. Now Guangzhou is still pretty populated, but it's sort of like the last main populated province before, particularly eastern Guangzhou, the last populated province before you move west into the less populated regions. So he talks about Langzhou, talks about the, there's a lot more of a Muslim feel to it, although it's certainly Chinese majority, but you get a little bit of that Tibetan feel. You get a little bit of the very edge of the Muslim world feel compared to the rest of China, which is like shopping malls, people making money, factories, you know, whatever might be brought to mind. He also mentions that because Langzhou is kind of on the frontier, and because it's hemmed in by all these mountains, but still has a huge population, the most western, more or less, big populated city, how much smog there is there. And it really has the feel of kind of a gritty, I don't know, Chicago in the 1850s kind of feels, kind of a real rough and tumble frontier type town, if still a big town, not, you know, like out in the middle of nowhere. And during this time, he actually goes away from Langzhou, and just a few hours away goes to the Tibetan retreat of Zia He, which is almost a complete 180 from Langzhou. Langzhou is in this valley, in this mountains, but still at a fairly low elevation. But then he goes out, and this is when you start getting into the Tibetan Plateau region. He sees one of the 3 or 4 most important Tibetan temples, and this isn't in the province of Tibet, but in the Tibetan Plateau region, the, I guess, area of influence of the Tibetan religion. And so he sees that, he sees the monks who, he can't understand their language, but he appreciates the rituals of the old monks teaching the young monks. He actually sees a picture of the Dalai Lama, which he says, you know, at a national level or like a big level, would never ever be allowed. But in China, because things are authoritarian on a large scale and can turn very authoritarian on a small scale when necessary, it's actually less overall authoritarian than people give it credit for. There's a lot of just sort of going by the seat of your pants, or, you know, working stuff out as it comes along. So he said he actually did see a large portrait of the Dalai Lama in this Tibetan place, which, you know, that's kind of China for you, just kind of more ad hoc than what people give it credit for. Now, that's certainly not the case during the Mao Zedong era 30 years ago, but that's kind of like modern China. So anyway, he goes west, and now he's out of the Han Chinese proper, and he goes into the minority groups, the minority regions, who are the Hui, the Uyghur, and the Tibetan. The Hui and the Uyghur are both Muslims, and then the Tibetans are obviously Tibetan Buddhists. But going up this road, I don't know, he meets he has a lot of stories kind of through the Ganzi province, you know, about this woman that does like abortions in these small remote towns, but feels no remorse about it because she's not trained to deal with Westerners like someone in, say, Beijing or Shanghai would, that they're going to be very close-lipped. So she talks about how they have to go around and perform abortions for women, and that if some women don't want them, they need like police that come in and hold the women down while they give them an abortion. Wow, that's really crazy. And then he just talks about, you know, like some truck drivers that he sees. He visits one of the most famous sites, which is the Cave of 1,000 Buddhas in western Guangzhou province. I'm actually going to have to do this in 2 parts because I just got interrupted, so I'll see you around for part 2. Alright, see you guys.